In this video, I'm going to go through every single difference I noticed One Punch Man Season 3 compared to its manga. I played it in 0.5 times speed, so I noticed a lot. If I missed anything and you saw it, leave it in the comments below, because I plan on doing this for every single episode in the season. I could use a few scouts, so leave what I missed in the comments below, and maybe I'll shoot you a message on Discord and see if we can make this some form of group project. So let's move on to episode 1. The opening shot is basically one-to-one. Even the text from the manga is directly the exact same as the text is saying in the anime. And until we get to this shot here, this shot is actually more zoomed out in the manga, and this is the same for the next shot with Sitch while they're discussing Garo. While Sitch is talking about the final fight of the second season, there isn't actually an overlay of season 2 playing. It's usually just a overlay of Silverfang. This shot here also more zoomed out in the manga, showing the other executives' reaction to Stitch's words. Another example of a shot being more zoomed in. Here they skip a panel of him walking over to the execs in anger and then cut straight to his rage out that he has before. This is an example of where they give us more detail. And Super Alloy Darkshine's design is slightly different in this adaptation, mainly because if you know, you know. This guy, he's not actually black. Yeah. They also skip another panel here in order just to jump straight to the more interesting shot, which is Child Emperor working on trying to find the location of the Monster Association. It was this shot that I really started to notice the sound design. Like, I don't know what it is, but it's so grounded to hear Child Emperor's sticks make this like mechanical noise, which usually would be overlooked in an anime like this, to be honest. Murata's horny ass design is left only for a few seconds on this shot. A lot of manga fans will be disappointed about to a degree, but also I'm very much happy leaving the horny ass fan service in the manga. If you want to see it, it's crazy there, but yeah, go have a look at it. Detail of Drive Knight's hologram is also vastly different for good reason, trying to get a very much non-animation friendly design to move as a hologram just for use in a single shot. It's just not something feasible for an animation studio, but they, 100% fulfill the exact same needs. The information is that Drive Knight is rushing through ahead of ahead of everyone else, so it's very clear that that's what's happening here. My only note is that his shoulder pads are a different design than they are in the manga. Another thing I'll just say, I mentioned fan service is a big thing that they're skimping down on, but come on, man. We've got a female fan service. Let Super Alloy Darkshine have like the tidy whiteys. Like they made him a lot smaller. Also, Tatsumaki is a lot bigger in comparison to the two characters here. Whether that's just because of perspective adjustments is unclear, but it's just something I noticed. This is another example of a change. They switched around some of the scenes. So usually after these three S-Class heroes are given the information that the raid is going to happen in 3 days, usually we cut to another one of the S-Class heroes, Zombie Man, him approaching one of his targets, and then we cut to Atomic Samurai and his apprentices. So they move this around. This scene happens later, and we move straight to Atomic Samurai. Something that I can really appreciate, by the way, is creatively remaking one of Murata's panels that is a vertical panel. A panel where it lends the fact that the page can look down far longer than a screen on anime would. And a screen on anime needs to make use of all the space in frame, while the manga can reshape the panel to display whatever information in whatever way they want. They creatively remade this in the anime by having this massive panning shot as it goes past each apprentice until it gets to Atomic Samurai. A really creative change to keep the source material as accurate as possible. It switched around where this line happens, the I'm stronger than you, mainly just for dramatic effect, because if he's saying it in the same frame as seeing this shot, the reaction doesn't hit as hard. Now the next panel is something that's genuinely really hard to adapt once again, because Murata gets really creative with how he does his spreads, and one of these examples is doing a full page drawing of Peri Peri Prisoner while he's walking out of prison cell, but only the top half of his torso is actually within canon inside the frame. So you're left with this situation where you just have to do a panning shot. There's not really any other way around it. But I will say, this is when the OST starts to kick in. See, we've been hearing dramatic music to, emphasize what we've been listening to, like all this exposition. But here's the first time where we get an OST that suits the character and just helps him come across all the more himself. And this is how they make up, by the way, for the fact that they couldn't do this full panning shot and showing his crotch. They do back shots between his legs. It's so good. My only complaint here is that this prisoner doesn't run to give him the sweater. That's the only thing I wanted from this scene that they didn't add. But it's honestly such a minute detail. It's just something I would have liked to seeing the energy he gave to get there, and you know, the next panel of him being so like out of breath because he's probably been running from like the other side of the prison just to give a sweater. But you know, then we also get this panel of him taking it from him, and it's like this absolutely princess magic filter, and the OST that plays is so good. It is so high gay energy, and it just cuts to Child Emperor going. It's so good. As we cut the Child Emperor, we actually miss a shot of him typing. We hear it, but we don't see it. So they've very clearly kept in mind that they're skipping that, but still acknowledge that that action is still happening. They leave out the detail that, you know, Child Emperor is calling Metal Knight when he is clearly eating breakfast, and Child Emperor, being the kid, has to correct him and say like, well, it's not breakfast because it's past noon. It's just one little tiny detail that does kind of display their relationship within, you know, the next few panels. The anime added this animation of Child Emperor biting to emphasize the point he's making, which is pretty cool. They really show that their compositing and lighting is so much better this season. Imagine what these middle parts would have looked like in season 2. Just think about it. Just think about how horrible they'd look. And now, they look beautiful. They look so much better. Animation of blood isn't actually in the manga at all. It's just a blank, stunned silence. In that shot there, Metal Knight is actually more zoomed in the manga, not the anime. The anime zoomed out to grant more detail. The screen doesn't just zip no signal. It does this like old school turn off animation where it goes instead. Also, for this entire scene, Child Emperor doesn't have this ID badge on it in the manga. So halfway through the episode of the manga, we actually zoom past Saitama's entire scene and jump straight to the end of the chapter, where we're revealed that the Hero Association is sending off the Narwiki Private Force, which consists of elite soldiers in super high-tech battle armor that get sent straight to save the executive's son, who's been kidnapped by the Monster Association. This is where we get our Zombie Man scene at the halfway mark of the episode. And might I say, his theme is also completely fire. It matches the character so much and lends this scene the creepiness that it's trying to deliver. So they actually add a good bit to Blizzard's thoughts here. Like, she's thinking what she's gonna do when she gets up to Saitama's apartment, but they're cutting constantly to other things. They cut first to the apartment itself and how it looks and how we can see it's run down and kind of a shithole. Then we cut to a graphic of what happened to the Blizzard group, which he mentions something happens to them. By the way, Tony's Gate fucking dirt sound effects hits when they show that tornado absolutely eviscerated the Blizzard group for no reason. Hilarious, by the way. Now, there's a few things in this scene that I would like to mention that changed, because there's actually a lot, but I'm only going to mention the things that I personally low-key missed. So in this shot here, you can see that nobody is looking at Blizzard as she enters, which is not the case in the manga. Everyone is looking at her apart from Saitama and King, who are entrenched in their game for good reason, because when you cut to King and Saitama when they're talking, you can see in King's Game Boy that he's absolutely shitting on Saitama. And that's why Saitama looks so desperately stressed here, and it helps convey that fact with the added information. Obviously, it's clear that Saitama is losing the game, but it's not clear that King is the one delivering that fucking whoop ass to him. This shot here is a perfect example of a really, really well adapted scene into anime. Now, I know what you're saying. There's a lot of detail lost within these two examples here. But the thing is, detail is always going to be lost in anime. You're trading it for another kind of detail. See, where manga can be so precise in every single stroke of the pen, anime can't. It simply can't. Because you're not just drawing one image. You're drawing hundreds upon thousands of images in the anime. So, yes, there's going to be lack in detail, but you replace that detail with color grading and lighting and the animation itself. So yes, you're kind of missing some detail here with his arm and the detail in his face and his shoulders. But apart from that, like, it very, very easily, you can tell it's the exact same scene. And this detail, like the detail at present here, is much higher than you would see from most other anime. Another detail is that Fang is getting the needle actually put into his back as she enters, and that isn't shown here. The acupuncture is already in his back, so it's probably some needless information that they cut back on for animation budget reasons. They adapted this panel as best they could. People are going to complain about the fact that this is just a fucking panning shot that goes on for way too long, which 100% it does. But the thing is, it does for a reason. Look at this panel. It's just all text and a single image. And what they did was amazing. They're really taking notes from Dandadan and using like really creative uses of color to emphasize emotional moments like this, where she's so completely overwhelmed with the situation she's been placed in. And then you see this shot and it's like, bang, okay, 1-to-1, fucking perfect replication of what we want to see from a scene like this. Blizzard freaking out over them not really taking the levity of the situation, and Saitama's deadpan, bitch what you doing here reaction. And here, I'm not sure if we're getting Silverfang fucking ass or Silverfang calf or whatever this part of him is, but it's actually supposed to be Silverfang's head covering his knee, or the lower half of his body. Here, Saitama just nods instead of actually telling Genos to tell her. They add scenes here and give more dialogue to Bang and Fang here, by the way. Now, although I really appreciate this visual here, and you know how it's just the exact same thing as in the manga, that's not really what we want. We wanted a version of this that, you know, fits in anime. This is literally just like a box. Have a little detail with the background in the room that you probably already have a render of, and just kind of gray it out, making the area feel so dead, and him being the only thing that's like emphasized, you know what I mean? This is a reused shot from the previous location because the angle is probably close enough to what they needed from the manga example, so they reused it to save time. But I do think that it would have been worth keeping, because also Saitama's expression in this is very different from the manga. See here, he's kind of like, this could be portrayed as like he's actually listening, but in the other one, he is just so fucking fed up and pissed off. This is the animation that they used in the trailer, and they repeated over and over and over again, which made people think that this scene was going to last way too long. But in the final version, it lasts all of 2 seconds, which is just such a godsend, and I'm really happy about. This scene felt like it was going to take 10 years to play out, but they just fucking smashed through it so goddamn fast. So more or less, chapter 86 of One Punch Man was adapted insanely faithfully when it came to everything. The only thing I can really complain about is like the compositioning of where like certain characters were laid out, and minor details in maybe 2 or 3 of the scenes. This chapter's adaptation a score of 8 out of 10, mainly because some of the character designs were obviously the anime's version of those character designs, meaning that there was minute differences, and that's going to be through the entire anime. So on to the next chapter. That shot, Garo's ab pan shot, is 1-to-1 Murata's work. It is like, even in terms of like small details, it's so goddamn accurate. Some of the pecs are rounder than Murata's work, but that's a stylistic difference. Everything else is almost perfectly the same. And Garo waking up and the close up on his face only grants us more detail. And although the angle isn't as dynamic for when he wakes up, everything's in the right place. All the bandages are in the right place. Even down to the damage to the bed is all more or less the exact same. Instead of Garo just reading the note and all that text being just this still of him reading it, they actually cut to a panning shot of the note itself with a close-up and then cut to Garo reading it, making it so it's just not one shot for like 15 seconds straight. That being said, you can really tell that this is one of the scenes that's like planned in 3D and drawn in 2D, because everything is just almost too perfect in how it's laid out. I love the use of color here, although, you know, we can't technically say it's not accurate to the source material. We can say that it adds so much emotion to this scene. Garo putting the shirt on is more or less the same, and him kicking the door is slightly different because the jail cell isn't as big, which, I'm not gonna lie, doesn't really change much in the large screen of things, especially because I've read the manga and I know what happens throughout this entire arc, and I know that this doorway has no effect on what happens later. So although not 100% accurate, it really doesn't matter. So something I noticed is in this walking scene, the manga has him leaning up against the wall because he's still feeling so sore and weak from the battle beforehand. So he's leaning on the wall for support as he walks up. This isn't present in anime. They switch around the scenes and reuse certain elements, not reuse, but use different shots that are similar to other shots in order to make the pace of this scene speed up a little, because it's very, you know, just information and text heavy, which is a really good sign. One thing I will say is that the text bubbles in the manga make it really clear that this moment Garo is talking to Garo alone and telepathically. That isn't very clear in the anime. They should have added like some weird voice modulation over his text dialogue here. So people's main issue with this is that they do cut a lot from this chapter. See, when Gyro suggests what they're going to do with these characters, Machine God just says, nah, the battle suits are pretty good. You should like keep them here because the battle suits are literally just for those individuals. They're not going to work on other people. So Gargoyle says, oh, we just use them as slaves. That's chill. But in the manga, monsters jump at these like terrified people, and it sets up for someone who we see later. Demon King the Ripper shows up and cuts up 3 monsters that are trying to eat these humans because they're like not waiting for their turn or waiting for Gyro to say it's okay to do so. And then after that point is when she steps in, stopping him from killing them himself, and suggests that he'll take them as slaves. Gyro says that Slasher King needs to give them to Super S, and that Ripper God is the one who notices Garo calling him out and demanding he come out and reveal himself. He doesn't do it himself. Then more or less the scene plays out pretty much exactly as it does in the anime. Apart from the ending, when Gyro is giving the mission to Bug God and Slasher King. And then as a sort of post-credit scene, we get this scene where our ninjas are discussing what they're going to do with Flashy Flash and how they don't trust the Monster Association, along with Speed of Sound Sonic's reintroduction, where he reveals that he feels the effects of the monster cell he ate in season 2, but in reality it actually just gave him diarrhea and he's just a little lighter, and that's why he feels faster. Hey, Editor Josephu here. I swear to fucking God, I did not plan this number, okay? This is how many differences I spotted. Sex number. Oh, that's so fucking cringe. Now, moving on to episode 2. Now, this scene is almost exactly the same as the source material, but there is a few subtle differences. See, the people here in the background, they don't actually have signs in the manga. Also, the guy here doesn't have these kind of glasses, this kind of face covering. This is something that really shouldn't matter, but this guy is supposed to be facing this way. This guy is facing the opposite direction in the manga. In the manga, the background for this shot is black, making it far more intimidating than it is here. But that being said, it's fine. This shot of Garo walking isn't in the manga. It's an addition to help the scene's transition seem more fluid. This shot plays out more or less one-to-one with exactly how Murata has it. The only difference is that we don't see his head. It's just entirely an impact graphic. Believe it or not, this is almost like entirely one-to-one again with Murata's work. The storyboarding did a really good job here. The tower and structure are actually really well detailed, and Garo himself is actually better detailed in this shot than he is in the manga. You can actually see Garo's abs and his muscle tone, while in the manga he's just a simple black tone with a little bit of shading on his top left shoulder. This guy's pants aren't the same style. They really nailed the background work here, and you know, leaned into the fact that this is an anime. A critique of the first episode was that we didn't see much animation and they didn't make use of the fact that they're using the anime medium, but they are making up for that here, adding this shot of Garo walking away from the situation, granting it more depth than it had before, then using the zoomed in frame later in the shot so that we can get a close-up of these buildings that look quite good. The information given while we're looking at this building here is actually given as Garo approaches the drunk man, rather than looking at the building here. This is done so we actually get a better grasp of what's going on in the next shot, mainly because it might be considered hard to portray Garo's inner thoughts and the situation he's approaching at the same time. This animation of Garo walking is actually in the same frame as the people who are reacting, rather than them being in 2 separate scenes. They make a cut here for the fact that the aspect ratio of an anime wouldn't really lend it too well to a shot like that. Maybe they could have had Garo walk in from the top of the frame and then cut to the next scene. However, in an anime production like this, where the budget is so, low and the turnaround time was unbelievably unfair on the studio, I can fully understand why they would skip on needless animation like this. That transition animation was not the greatest, but it's actually not too bad. There's a few details details missing from this shot, mainly because of the fact it's being animated, but his hand should have strain on it, and there should be a shot of Garo actually grabbing the knife before he breaks it. However, this shot is perfect. This close-up of the knife is an entirely new creation. It's not in the manga, and it's to give us more variation while we're listening to Garo and his internal monologue, mainly because in the manga we're only given a shot of Garo walking up the stairs. That the entire time might seem repetitive, so this shot is to break that up. This is one inconsistency I caught here. This character is the one who tried to stab Garo. He should have ran away like he did in the previous panel, and the man with the suit should be here watching him run away. Also, Garo doesn't grab the rail when he's climbing the stairs like he does in the manga. Right here, the rice should be on the left and the salad should be on the right. Although this is consistent with the manga, I just do have to say, this fork is fucking huge. It's just as big as it is in the manga, but Jesus Christ, the fork is almost the same size of his whole ass hand. This is a extended shot of him eating. Probably just done for, once again, budget reasons, of him eating this. In the manga is actually coming from the back, and he only has one piece of meat. We know this because when he's ordering the rest of the food in the manga, you can see the full steak in the next panel. Then instead of the steak being covered in garlic, it's covered in brown sauce. I'm not sure what type of sauce this is, but you know, it's there. And when Garo bites the steak, he also has a knife up to the top left of the frame, which isn't in the anime. It's at this point where Garo orders more food again and eats it insanely fast like he does in the manga. This shot is slightly different. These characters are all sitting in the right place. Her coffee mug is supposed to be a circular one. This table shouldn't be in view, and this man shouldn't be as visible as he is here. And that's something that actually made me notice in the manga, that Murata very clearly drew this guy first and then added the background on top of him, mainly because you can fully see his shadow through it. This is an extra shot added of him stuffing more food into his mouth. This is another added shot of him chewing, and it shows his reaction to choking rather than him just hitting his chest straight away. Also, the difference in water jug is quite visible. This shot right here just shows how overly detailed Murata likes to be sometimes. See, this is just a big old pint glass. Murata actually in universe has a reason for why it's so goddamn big, because it's a pouring jug. It's not a pint glass. This thing's like 2 liters big because it has some form of fruit and vegetables in it. I have no idea what they're supposed to be. Lemons and limes and like celery or something. The drinking is more or less the same, as is him slamming it down on the table. These next shots with Saitama are more or less the exact same as they were in the manga. However, there's added details like these blue trails, the graphic of his thoughts giving visual representation, and also the fact that the music isn't here immediately. The music cuts in later. They carry over this graphic of the music to, you know, just grant the scene more variety. The layout of this shot is slightly different and his reaction delayed. Something I need to say is that these two images are so different, but they portray the exact same emotion. See, the complete blankness and lack of detail on this page is only contrasted by the insane detail Murata puts into everything else. So this image evokes such a different emotion from us than it would if it was etched with this same detail that Murata uses. So how do you portray the same thing in anime? Because that color and lack of detail doesn't translate over to anime well. And this is where I think their use of color and overall art in this season has so far shined so goddamn bright, because this just gives off such a clear visual of the despair he's feeling inside. But I am insanely impressed with how well they visually display this scene. It is once again one-to-one with that manga, which I know a lot of people have had issue with the first episode, but I do think that there was enough animation and like the visuals displayed the emotion that needed to be felt so well that this particular whole scene with Garo and then Blizzard and Saitama just came across so effectively. Next comes this scene with Garo, where he's just thinking over and mulling over his options and what's happened in the past few days. We get a much more detailed background where he's thinking of Garo, once again looking at the Colosseum-like structure that is in the center of the Monster Association. They did quite a good job of this walking animation when walking up this hill with a visually stunning background. He also here just says, I guess, rather than the manga's alternative, which is, I guess it doesn't really matter. They use a different shot to show that Garo notices the kids bullying his friend, a frontward facing shot rather than the background walking facing shot. They also skip over a panel of the kids pulling on his cheek and instead skip straight for when the rocks are being thrown at him, instead placing the cheek pulling scene till after. This is the part that is going to get memed on the most out of anything else. This animation of Garo sliding down is just one-to-one almost with that clip from Invincible where the Immortal is PNG flying towards Earth. It's just something that they're definitely just 100% going to make fun of. And the only thing that they needed to do for this is add a bit of dust particles of him sliding down, and it would have been 100% like just perfect. Also, the kid's ass is supposed to be showing in his shorts here. Instead of just silhouettes, there's actually detail on the characters here. I don't know why, but this shot is giving me bad vibes. It's different because the clouds are different in the background. Boom. This is so contrarian, right? But the background is slightly different than it is in the manga. A fence should be running up along this hill here. These bushes shouldn't be here. A different style of fence should be running up to just about here, with what looks like an entrance to this hill that actually rolls the whole way around this corner. Also, Murata forgot that the character was supposed to be holding a book, so in his version, both arms are down by his side. Instead of a flashback to season 1 and seeing its interesting compositing for metal, we actually just get a single panel of the heroes that were involved in the attack when Gaara was defending this kid in the previous season. This shot here is actually supposed to be to the right of Gaara rather than the shot we have here to the left. This is why the two characters are facing the wrong directions. Instead of displaying the information in these two panels here, they actually do the second half of this text box in this shot here and make it a panning shot to reveal the kid when he starts to talk. This also replaces the next panel, which is the kid who's supposed to be pulling Garo's clothes and asking then if he dined and dash. I have to say, the backgrounds in this is very different, you know, in ways. That's why I'm talking about it now. It's because it's different. No other reason. Not because it looks fucking stunning. This information is shown in the previous shot in the manga, and this is the only information that is given while we see the shot of the fist. This is an added shot just to show the impact and grant some animation to Saitama's punch. I was actually pleasantly surprised with this, although it's such a quick frame, because for the comedic time it needs to be so instant to contrast like the previous, you know, tone. And they did actually animate Garo spinning away. It's so hard to see, but it's there. They did it. Also, I would like to note that Saitama doesn't have the same expression on his face really as he does in the manga. It just looks like he's talking about anything and he is a little bit sweaty. But the pure self-loathing you see on his face in the manga is just priceless for this scene. And I personally thought it was quite important that they got it right here. Also, I love the Team Rocket star that was added after. This is another shot of the tree line rather than what it was supposed to be, which is a shot of the hill. Now, some people might think that this is actually different than in the manga, but it actually isn't. This scene was added after this manga as like a chapter 88.5. It was like a hidden scene that Murata wanted to include, but he couldn't. So he included it in an additional chapter after. So they've added it in here. This is where they include the shot from previously, the shot I was talking about with the hill. This shot in the manga is far more zoomed in, and we don't see that the kid is crouching down looking over Garo, nor does the crow fly past. This shot once again is flipped. Garo is on the wrong side, as is the same for this shot, but there also should be a building in the background here. Although it is something that I'm not that happy with in the anime so far is his portrayal of Bug God. See, there's like no tone to his character design, which is something that there's so much of in the manga. And also, I just feel like someone forgot to color his eyes in here. Whoever was supposed to do the like coloring in the teeth just forgot to do his eyes. However, the close-in shots are just spectacular. Look at it. It's just mwah. This use of color and impact is just, I love it. In the manga, Garo turns his head to say this to the kid. This panning shot is taken at a slightly different angle than in the manga. This shot actually corrects a mistake Murata made when he was drawing. In this panel, it cuts back to the two monsters, but one of them is missing, even though in the previous panel, he was standing right there. This close-up shot of King the Ripper is divine. I love it. And it's far more detailed than the version in the manga. However, the one in the manga does have its like unbelievable charm. See, something never really truly displays pure like mental instability than the white and black contrast of just scraggly ass hair, and the manga does that so well. Such a minor thing, but his shoes have platforms in the anime, which they don't in the manga. And this is where the first chapter ends, at the stare down between King the Ripper and Garo. And this is where Saitama and the kid talking come in as the bonus chapter at the end of the episode, which is a single page. Now on to chapter 89. See, chapter 89 actually starts straight back to the Garo versus King the Ripper situation. But instead, while trying to break up the pacing of that fight, they skip ahead a third of the way through the first chapter to give us this conversation with Birdman and Garo Garo. In many of these panels, there's no detail at the background. However, in the anime, they are able to keep that detail in the background. In this panning shot, we can't see the wall or doorway that Birdman entered from. We can in the manga. They also use this panning shot to include the information from this panel that has a close-up of Garo Garo while he's thinking about Monster Lord Orochi. Instead of this panel of the roof, when he says, "I'll just wait for a new test subject," we get a blank panel and just a text bubble. Very small thing, but Zombie Man's arm should be straight down, but instead you can tell that he's already holding his phone from the next shot. The shot fronts are a little different, but it's more or less the same. Instead of talking into his phone or recorder, whatever this is, he actually is smoking a cigarette and is thinking this all inside his head rather than recording it for proof. In the manga, he crushes the cigarette in his hand, burning his hand, but still using it to put out the cigarette. In this, he simply clutches his recorder a bit harder. Then, instead of continuing the Zombie Man scene, we cut back to Garo and how he's being confronted by the two monsters. This goes back to the previous section. This was all in the one scene previously, so they've cut it up with that Zombie Man scene, and it's more or less accurate in its opening. However, this shot of their shadows is not initially in the manga. This shot of him front facing them is also an addition only in the anime. The shot of the bandages hitting the ground is an addition in the anime. When he is confronting Garo in the manga, we get a front facing panel of Garo standing over the kid, but instead it's all just Bug God talking. In the manga, on his blades, you can see the reflection of Garo and the kid, but you can't hear. Him raising his hand here isn't in the manga. This close-up shot of him shouting is slightly different in the manga. In the manga, he slaps the book out of the kid's hand instead of just shouting in his face. The animation of Slasher zooming in is an addition in the manga, and only this stabbing image is in the manga. This sequence with the water-flowing fist is entirely an anime exclusive, leading into him stopping the blade, and the flip is almost one-to-one with the anime to manga. Instead of Bug God saying he's a spineless wimp, he actually says, "You're weak at your heart," meaning that, Garo actually has a heart and he's not an actual monster. So after he stances up and is getting charged at by the two monsters, that's when, in the manga, we cut to Garo and Birdman's conversation. We get the end of Zombie Man's scene that started earlier and happens now in the manga. In these few shots, there's a lot of extra added detail. This sort of chibi stylized scene doesn't actually happen in the manga at all, which I also won't spoil because many of you are not going to be reading the manga. But needless to say, we get more Zombie Man next episode, and we are going to get the entire Garo, Bug Guy, and Slasher fight. So you have something to look forward to. Next up, it's episode 3. But let's get right into the video. So we continue from chapter 89 in the manga, where Zombie Man is confronting Mr. Genius. There's an additional scene in the anime where Dr. Genius puts down a mug in front of his side of the table as he sits down. There's also a panel that wasn't adapted with Carnage Kabuto, as there's a little toy hanging from the light of his likeness. Minor details about Zombie Man stomping his foot on the table. Obviously not satisfied with the answer that Dr. Genius gave him. His shoe is missing 2 belts on the upper part of it. Yep. They also don't have the close-up shot of Dr. Genius sweating beads that Zombie Man has an axe raised above his head, and the close-up of Zombie Man's own face in his response, as well as Cyborg Gorilla's reaction. They skip a panel of Dr. Genius just pausing to think, and then instead cutting straight to his monologue about why he stopped his experiments and the mention of what a limiter is. There's a clock missing from the background here in this panel, not to mention this window here is supposed to be open and a curtain pushed to the right. The shot of Garo punching is perfect. It's missing some vein details, that's about it, and a hand in the lower right corner. And when he punches Bug God, the impact is from a different angle in the manga, because Raw Ripper is also coming in from the right to cut him up. Not to mention there's 2 extra shots of the impact rather than just the single one. This shot is the wrong way around. Garo is supposed to be facing the other way. And this entire sequence of him dashing away and parrying isn't in the manga whatsoever. It's a totally new anime original edition, as is this clash of Water Flowing Fist and Slasher's red slashing attacks, as well as this close-up swing. Looks pretty damn good to me. And then the jump, dodge, backflip, handstand into Slasher. Then this is the adapted panel from the manga as he runs towards him, swinging his arms. I counted every single one of the after images in this sequence compared to the anime to manga, and it's actually just like perfectly accurate. They got every single swing right. They just didn't add every swing that was in the manga, mainly because there's no reason for him to dodge them. They're just added in for like visual spectacle in the manga. Something that did confuse me a really good bit is that we see Bug God creeping up behind Garo, and in the manga he deflects the blade attacks into Bug God's face, which is something that we saw in the trailer for this series. It's just not present in this fight for some reason, instead cutting straight to Bug God's single-handed fist slam. However, we are given an extra shot of Garo's reaction to the damage that had just been done by Bug God, helping like Bug God come across as a bit more of a Chad than he does in the manga. And then the absolute like Kobe punch that Bug God does is really, really close to the source material, instead only cutting from his waist up rather than showing the back of Bug God's foot. Like, that brought us like a super dynamic pose, which they obviously didn't have the budget for. So they have extra rubble to add more detail to the impact. We skip the panel that shows Garo impacting into the cables from a distance, cut straight to the close-up in like a continuous panning shot, which to be honest is a really good choice because it makes the scene flow, you know, more smooth than it did before, because JC really do need to work on their cuts. Sometimes their cuts are insanely jarring and completely like remove you from the scene. So this one cut in particular was a good choice by them. His exit from the electric cable looks a little differently, but you know, nothing too crazy. Them jumping forward is also really close to the source material. Apart from one thing, a few things. Royal Ripper's arms aren't pointing forwards, and nor can we see Bug God's arms punching towards him as well. And Bug God's mouth's supposed to be open. We also replaced just this close-up shot of Garo screaming as he's dashing towards them with a fucking sweet-ass flip in the air with a fucking lightning kick that would put Pikachu to goddamn shame. Cutting to the slow pan image that we saw in the trailer, and that is really close to the source material's adaptation. With only a few minor differences here and there. One, the background isn't here. We usually see a landscape in the background, and there is minor positioning differences with Bug God and Royal Ripper. This shot here, Cyborg Gorilla should be in the background, but he's not. Also, something I would like to mention is that the sound cut here felt way off. See, there's all this like instrumental music cutting in to like make the audience sympathize with Saitama, but you know, obviously what they're talking about is complete like stupidity and it's just a gag. So this guy's our grounded character who says ridiculous, that's crazy, that's stupid. But in order to get that desired effect, they cut the music so harshly. So his ridiculous, which is at a similar volume to the music, just feels really jarring and took me out of the scene a little bit. This shot is far more zoomed out than it is in the manga, usually a close in on the weathered eyes of Zombie Man. This shot in the manga has the cup still spilled from when Zombie Man stamped on the desk, but here we have Gorilla Cyborg picking up and cleaning it up. All the visuals in these panning shots are like, they're great, you know, they're well drawn assets, but the thing is, this isn't exactly what we kind of would want from this scene. In the manga, it works so well because, well, I'm not gonna lie, the level of detail Murata puts into each and every design in these big single page spreads just adds so much detail. You read through it as quickly as you can and you get done with the page in under 11-12 seconds. So the fact that there isn't much going on other than just showing the character designs of the characters we've seen in the past, it doesn't weigh on us too much. But here it lasts quite a while. It lasts over a full minute of exposition, panning shots, and these characters being revealed. I think that instead of having them being panning and having these PNGs, which is what they are, move just a little bit isn't enough. They have shown that they are really good at doing imposing impact frames on characters to emphasize emotional moments or just funny moments. If they had just done this with some of the main players from this roster, have the panning shot and then have boom, Deep Sea King pops up and he's got this kind of like almost a card with some form of effect, maybe a watery splash or some crap, it would break this up a little bit more and then have him being placed into this roster of villains. And then add Boros, boom! Just two little additions to add at least something to this full minute of pan. I fully understand why it's one-to-one with the manga, but you know, anime is a different medium. It needs to deliver something different. So, not the best play by JC, but personally I can put up with it. They use a different angle for the pan in shot here, but more or less all the other assets are in place. This shot in particular is insanely close to exactly what I would want from this shot. Only thing I'd like to see here is that we can see Royal Ripper interacting with the environment, but Bug God is just, completely still. I'd like to see Bug God like getting up or stancing up in a better way. Some form of movement from him, even if it's just his hands getting a better grip on the ground while his antennas move in the wind. Also, he's missing a big bulge from the back of his back. I'm just not sure why they didn't add that. And also these horns. This shot with Royal Ripper is great with his eye from behind his hair. It looks great. This shot is great. The animation's great. Would have loved to see Royal Ripper's eye be more expressive like it is in the manga. Once again, no movement from Bug God. I want to see more movement from Bug God. He's the GOAT. The cut here was a bit jank because instead of the full cut, we're supposed to see panned out image of Garo spitting the tooth into the ground rather than skipping straight to the impact of the tooth. This art of Garo is great. His eyebrows are a little different. That's about it. And the difference here is that when Garo is shouting that the kid's not involved in this, they have this hard image slash cut out of the other time Garo beat the crap out of this monster. Kind of like transparent image overlay, a faded memory of Garo's previous interaction. I personally feel that they should have done a similar effect or just not included it at all. If people are watching One Punch Man in, I don't know, the same year that they've watched the previous season, then they'll remember that guy, maybe. And if not, then it doesn't really matter too much, but just that impact was just took me out of it so much. This impact was great. Once again, only major difference I want from this is that Royal Ripper's eyes need to be rounder. It just makes him so much more creepy than the kind of narrow eyes he has in these scenes for some reason. The punch impact here of Garo is great. Instead of getting the full shot of Bug God's swing, we do just get his fist, but it's still, impact still feels pretty strong. These slashes are great. However, he only slashes once, then it's supposed to cut to the reaction of the monster and the kid, then we get the onslaught of slashes. I would not have expected them to have this effect when he is satisfied over his kill. It got me laughing, but at the same time, in the manga, it comes across as this like insanely creepy thing. But that's like our perspective of what has just happened. His perspective is that, this is doing something for him. You know what I mean? Like, it's doing something for him. So the visuals do make sense. My only complaint about this last shot here of them walking away and Garo's body is that the blood pool, it should be a bit bigger, and also his clothes should be torn up a little. This was all roughly half of chapter 89 adapted into 7 minutes of anime, with the opening taking up 2.5 minutes. So 6 minutes. 6 minutes for half a chapter. Usually you'd be like, well, that's fair enough. That's only just one chapter, 30 pages. It's 6 minutes for 30 pages of detail, and a lot of which being exposition, something that we've seen so much of in the anime so far. Later on, we get a lot more hard action, and that Ripper scene was pretty good. It wasn't insanely good, but it was good. It was good enough for me to be happy to see what they do with the rest of the season. I'm not saying that I would rather take this project over someone else, some other studio, but what I'm saying is that they are actually able to deliver us a anime. No other studio has been able to do that. Talks with Mappa and Madhouse seem to always get nowhere when it comes to One Punch Man and its committee, which is controlled by Shueisha, by the way. But anyway, let's move on. We get a very accurate adaptation of what Saitama's apartment looks like in its original panning shot, and to Genos' face. So, no changes there, really. In this shot of revealing what Genos is looking at, which is King's Game Boy, instead of just having them be an empty void, they're, clearly visibly on the ground in Saitama's apartment still. Now, this is where I draw the line. This Game Boy is supposed to be au naturel. Plain Jane, that cream color that's on all old consoles should be here. Also, some of the details in the game is different. The text is laid out slightly differently, and there's like a cityscape here at the bottom of the screen, which isn't in the manga. Not to mention there is some detail missing from the edge of the console. So in this scene, we see Genos, much more wide pan image we have here. And as I said in my previous videos, Genos' battle damage isn't as detailed here than it is in the manga. Genos' internal monologue, they use a slightly different visual visual. See, it's like a spotlight in a blue, depressing void. While in the manga, it's a black void, obviously black and white, but it's a sparking, fearful spotlight rather than a actual visual one. I'm drawing it. I'm pulling at straws here. A lot more detail here in the background compared to the manga, with a actual view of Saitama's apartment in this shot, which were visible in previous shots in the manga, but just not with the next two, King and Genos. Now, this was like the second thing that kind of took me out of this episode. JC have actually been quite good at remaining consistent in terms of its art style, but here, these guys all seem pretty fine, but Genos's face shape is just totally different to what it was in the previous shot. And because this shot lingers for so long, like it's meant to, it should linger for this long, but they got to keep in mind that this is going to be on the screen for this long, so they should get the art design correct. I would have loved to hear some sound effects of Genos's like body working overtime when he's like walking over to the door, mainly because, you know, he's busted up and sketchy as hell, and you can see that this is visible in the shaky animation that they've gone with. There's a difference here, and that's that the door frame has this wooden pillar underneath it, which it does not in the manga. To me, it's kind of crazy that this is the reaction they have to Saitama being like, oh, it's terrible out there. But last episode, when Blizzard came in, they just didn't give a crap. They were like, yeah, it's whatever, just give us a minute. Like, nothing happened that didn't happen in that previous episode, you know what I mean? However, there is some minor differences here, mainly that Bomb's eye here should be blacked out, and Genos's detail on his face is slightly different to what it's supposed to be. Saitama's supposed to have a sweat drop here from just being like, bruh, what? There's more detail of Saitama's apartment here, mainly just due to the fact that they need more detail, because otherwise there would be no like there would just be blank spaces with nothing. For some reason, Saitama just stops unzipping the zip here, which doesn't make too much sense. This is the exact angle he is in the manga, sure, but that doesn't mean that you need to stop on it. Pulling that down a bit more would have taken away from a lot of the static imagery that we've seen in this season of One Punch Man, and also have him start to take off the rest of the costume would have added an insane amount, because in the next shot we get of Saitama, he's not wearing his suit. He's in a t-shirt. So he obviously has taken this off in the panel of Genos asking what happened, which, by the way, is really, really close to source material, has a bit of colorization to add that detail, that emotional detail that I was talking about before. And the same goes for the shot with King and the shot with Bang. And then this shot with Saitama is really good. So the shot with Saitama where he says he dropped his wallet, obviously having the blank space would be fine, it would work okay, but they added like this kind of sketchy watercoloring feeling shot of just adding detail but it feeling hollow. At least to me, it seems to lend itself really well to the joke. Once again, not in the manga, but a great use of color here of these guys are just sick of Saitama overreacting over nothing, and Saitama being enraged. You know, blue for bruh and red for what the heck. I feel like a few close-ups of Saitama going would have been so strong here to break up this huge panning shot. However, there's added detail to the shot in other ways. You know, for example, Blast isn't supposed to be here. He's not in the panel in the manga, but he's in the shot in the anime. The shot of the reveal of the true horror peak, especially with the coloring that they've done. I love this. A lot of people have complained about the coloring for these moments. I love them. So Genos' wording is a little different in the anime, but it's more or less the same, you know, idea. And the music hits, making it really funny. Another jarring cut with the sound though, when Genos is like, I'm gonna go, and then Bomb comes in and they hard cut the music rather than having a sound effect or have it fade out. It's a little jarring. I feel like there's a little more detail to Genos here, like his eyes aren't blacked out, and in the manga the eyes are blacked out, and I feel like that adds more detail, more emotional detail, because it shows that Genos really doesn't like seeing her around. She takes too much of Saitama's attention. It's like, you know, a sibling rivalry almost. You know that hate I was talking about earlier? It's visible here in the anime. Red ass eye fucking despair that he couldn't be the one to help his master out. It's in this moment that Genos has the realization that she wants to be Saitama's disciple as well, and how he needs to stop that at all costs, but that thought is interrupted by something really fast approaching them. Now, instead of the two panels that show Genos' initial reaction and him thinking that something is approaching at high speed, instead of it being a panning shot of outside Saitama's apartment again and a upper body shot of Genos from below, what they do is they simply just zoom in on the previous imagery, adding different shade of color grading to show that different emotion, then hard cutting to the next panel. Instead of having more imagery of outside of Saitama's apartment, they cut straight to the reaction image of Bang, Bomb, and Blizzard. which is a panel that has no detail in the background, but here it does. It's really nice to see the transition in King's face in the anime. In the manga, it's just straight up you see King in despair over Genos actually expecting him to be a hero, but here we see King's dead face, the face that he has at all times when, you know, nothing's happening, which is the whole reason he has the status of a hero, because he looks so goddamn cool. But then when he's actually expected to do something, the transition from deadpan to terrified makes the moment funnier. I have to say I'm a little disappointed in this scene here. Genos is quite literally a PNG that is pushing against King's back and pushing him out the door. We know Genos has use of his arms, so we should actually have Genos, you know, pushing him out the door and having the actual animated medium showing that impact. In the next shot in the manga, we can actually see Genos using his arm, so we know that he would be well able to push King out the door. The color grading here on King opening the door, great once again. I love this impactful use of color. And instead of hearing the character enter by foot, we just cut to the next image, which isn't great. An anime here, we want to see him walk in as part of the experience. I feel like Genos here isn't walking up with enough urgency as he is in the manga. The manga, he looks quite shocked to see him, but in the anime, he's quite deadpan. The character art of this shot is really, really good for Dr. Kusno. So the only issues I have with it aren't really issues, they're just slight differences. See, missiles aren't actually visible in the canister here, and there is actually a little bit of more detail on the cannon on his left shoulder. In the manga, they cut out King's character, even though he would be in this shot, but they fixed that in the anime. They skip over a panel of Blizzard, Bang, and Blast's reaction to Dr. Kusno entering, instead having a more natural transition to the reveal that Saitama is here, and this is the first time that Genos' mentor and Genos' creator, I suppose, are meeting. Basically, two mentors meeting each other. I'll mention that the positioning of the people in this shot, where Kusno is obviously monologuing and Saitama's having none of it, is very different. See, in the manga, we actually can't see Bang here at all, and King is in the correct position, but he's not accompanied by Blizzard, who's supposed to be right here beside him. And then we're supposed to have Bang and then Bomb beside him. Anime correction here. So the manga never specified that Kusno had entered deeper into Saitama's apartment. So when he opens this box, it's assumed that he walks over to the TV, where we can see in the panel, and open it. But that transition hasn't been, made clear, so they correct it, and in the anime, he opens it in the corridor where he enters from. In the manga, the present that Dr. Kusno gives of the premium meat Riz sound effect is wrapped, but here in the anime it's not, to make it more visually clear as to what's in it. I assume, I don't really know. Love the use of color in these next two reaction shots of Saitama's change in attitude towards Dr. Kusno and Blizzard's reaction to said thing. This shot of Blizzard and talking to Saitama is actually granted a little bit more space in the anime, giving a reaction shot to Saitama listening to her. Instead of breaking it up into two different shots, it's the same shot with a slight pan and, reactions from Saitama. And a little animation for when Saitama realizes that all the motherfuckers thinking they're sticking around for dinner, and breaking up the dialogue from his reaction to that between these two panels rather than just the single one. This is an example of the panels being almost one-to-one with the source material here. The kid, obviously more color detail in his reaction panel, but then below we see the placement for Bug God, King Ripper, and the kid being a little bit off. Instead of being totally center, it's supposed to be a little bit to the left. They skip a close-up shot on Gero Gero. Here, this panning shot of Gero Gero is not in the anime. Simply, it's another zoomed in shot of Royal Ripper. This flashback to Garo is missing little details at the bottom. This zooming panning shot here, zooming into Gero Gero's head, is supposed to have a visual of Child Emperor's drones that are like drone dogs, that he actively is showing them using telekinesis, but that isn't seen here. And this close-in shot is at a slightly different angle. They also skip over a panel of Bug God and Royal Ripper. We actually see a lot more variety of monster in the manga, because we don't actually get this talking panel of Rhino Wrestler until after he punches the tire bag. So they just switch the orders up a little bit. Also, he punches it more than once in the manga, and after punching it a bunch, he actually charges through it. If they're going to use this sliding image for this talking scene, I would have loved to see some movement in her mask just to show that she is the one talking. We're also missing a shot of their response. They are supposed to be like, yes, as you wish, Mistress Super S, and showing them with love hearts in their eyes. Then we're supposed to cut to the ninjas and their battle on the bridge, which we'll cover in a minute, instead of this Dracula wannabe. He comes after. There's supposed to be a dead monster on the ground that he has just sucked dry. Then it comes to that panic shot we saw before and the conversation he had with the turtle monster. He daps up his mouth, cleaning himself up, and that's when the other two monsters walk past. This shot with the prisoners and the cat monster is almost one-to-one with the manga, apart from the fact that the panic shots are good, but we do see every character that's talking in the manga. We see close-ups of them, which just isn't present here. Mainly because it's not that important, and they're already skipping over some of the content in these sections here at the end where they're revealing some of the characters that are going to be in the coming arc. This is where they insert the ninja scene. This is probably the best of these kind of like revealing shots, right? It has the most animation, and obviously it's set in the same place as the fight with Flashy Flash later in the season. Spoilers for that. I'm not going to say any more on that. The designs are really, really good in comparison. We see this flying kick. The character's still visible in the manga, but obviously that'd be a nightmare to animate. So what they've done is they've just turned him into a fiery circle, which is the same, display as we see here. They add this whole sequence of his foot coming in. It has a lot more detail than it does in the manga. See, in the manga, he blocks the first impact, but here he dodges it, jumps back, and then blocks it. And that's when we see this panel here, after letting off a few flurries of his own. In this, dashing around thing, we don't actually see them at all in the manga, but we kind of see glimpses of them in the anime. I really feel like a better way to do this would have just to make the details of the splashes more impactful. And that way, it's very clear that they're jumping from place to place. In the manga, we can see close-ups of their monsterized faces, but in the anime, we just don't see it at all. It's blackened out. Then we see this swirling attack that they've done here, doing a pretty good job of visualizing what's going on in this mayhem, while also visually showing what caused this explosion. Then having them run up the side of the cliff and the bridge. My only note is that they skipped the last panel of that interaction. Now, this is an interesting enough change. See, here, they're supposed to come across this massive monster lizard who wants to eat, Royal Ripper's kid. And he's about to fight Royal Ripper for the right to do so. That's when G5 comes in, and in order to get the lizard out of his way, throws another monster into the lizard's mouth. And, in the manga, that seems to satisfy him, and he fucks off. That's where we cut to this scene in the anime, where G5 reveals that he has the head of Metal Knight's helmet. Then more or less the rest of the episode is one-to-one with the manga, mainly because it's simply talking scenes. So there was this many differences from the manga that I spotted. Please let me know if you spotted any more or less in the comments below. Moving onward to episode 4. First major difference is the fact that we don't actually get to see this entire rewind in the manga. We simply see 7 panels of something that happened in the previous chapter or fight. The things that remain the same are the initial impact of him waking up and the reaction shot of him waking up. There's about 7 sequences that were added in the manga, so let's just tot them up straight away. Something I noticed is when he was getting up, there is blood splattering off his back. I'm surprised they didn't add a blood splatter sound effect. They usually do add like that, but here it's just not visible. Also, there is blood dripping down from Garo's nose in the manga, which cannot be seen in the anime, because the angle in which they take it is slightly different. When Garo is standing up, he also just doesn't have the same type of trousers on. See, his trousers in the anime are skin tight to the calf to the bone, but in the anime he still has those bikie trousers on, although they have melded with everything above his belt. The reaction we get when Garo was looking up into the sky initially is an entirely different shot than it is in the manga. Garo says that he got beat by a monster, which is untrue. In the manga he gets beat by monsters because it was Royal Ripper and Bug God, and he also mentions what's going on with his body rather than what's going on overall. The shots they show for reaction shots are slightly different than they are in the manga. The shot when Garo is reacting to the fact that his clothes are molded to his body now. In the manga, it's 2 separate angles in 2 separate shots, but in the anime, not only is Garo facing the wrong direction, but it's also just one panning shot that doesn't even have a close-up. When Garo is cracking his back and then his neck, we can notice that the surroundings are slightly different. There should be a pool of blood behind him and a crater in front of him. Both of these details are not in the anime. He is standing on top of the crater rather than behind it. Not to mention, there's also some barricades that are missing in the left-hand side of the panel. The buildings are also slightly arranged differently. That was actually a really good cut. Watching that, and I was like thinking, hell, they might mess up that cut and remove the kind of menace he has, but they didn't. The cut is like perfectly fine and the music fades out really well. My only note is that they didn't really need to add that coloring on his face. The original was pretty fucking good. So instead of cutting straight to Hero HQ, we actually are supposed to cut to the battle site and notice that there is a lack of Garo in it. Then cutting to that panning shot, which is really good by the way, of the Hero Association. And then into the panning shot of Child Emperor. This walking shot of Child Emperor isn't actually in the manga. Instead, we see the walking shot from him behind, and he immediately interacts with Mr. Senegal. The hallway in the Hero Association is shaped very differently. See, there's like elements of it that they've carried over into the anime, but the overly detailed corridor that Murata drew would be hell to adapt into anime. So I can see why they've gone for a more simpler, sleek alternative. In these close-up shots of Child Emperor, in the manga, there's a lack of detail in his eyes that is present in the anime. The buildings in the panning shot in the anime are far more beat up than they are in the manga. I'm not sure if this was simply because a creative liberty or to try better emphasize the fact that this is a rundown hole. This shot of from behind Child Emperor as he is talking is actually meant to be at the start of this monologue, not at the end. They switched it up so that it would grant more space and more transition time between Child Emperor talking and Singal. This initial shot is completely original and it transitions to this panel from the manga. Added detail in the anime. This panning shot has added pipes and stuff to like grant the scene more depth, which isn't present in the manga. These lightning bolts are added in the anime. They are not present in the manga. The manga simply has a black panel. Anime added a shot of when Segal leans up against the wall. In this panel, it is simply a large panel of the scene that's about to take place. But in the anime, they actually use it as a spot to run the dialogue from Stitch, skipping over his stressed reaction shot. The close-up on Sentigal's eyes is slightly different than in the manga. Mainly down to one simple fact, it is a ever so slightly different angle. The next shot is supposed to be a overhead shot of the discussion rather than Stitch's close-up that we see here. So instead of a close-up on the potluck, we actually get a menacing vibe from the outward of Saitama's apartment, then cutting to where everyone leaves their shoes and seeing a massive pile of them, showing that nobody has left his house yet. Then we get hit with a instant full page image of the entire group surrounding the hot pot. Then we get a close-up of the hot pot and then a reaction to Saitama's face, dread, which is very similar in the anime. However, the close-up happens at the start in the anime and not at the end, and is a panning shot in the anime rather than an instant imposing image that's in the manga. And I'm not gonna lie, I don't think they could have adapted the next like 2 panels any better of the hands appearing out of the darkness. Basically one-to-one with the manga with the added emphasis on that star that shines out from the center, which isn't in the manga. Instead, it's just an instant pan to absolute destruction from all these heroes, and obviously King being lacking in the strength department gets blasted away by the shockwaves. This shot of Genos's eye glowing in order to put Blizzard in her place and remove the meat that she's trying to get is entirely anime original. The only shot that is in the manga is the shot of him snatching it and the intimidating panel underneath it, which, by the way, is a far more close-up image, not showing him actually holding the meat that he stole from Blizzard. However, the Blizzard shot is basically one-to-one. I have no notes. Apart from that, the fact that the fire effects around here are kind of a bit jank. One thing I will say is that it's clear that in the manga, in this panel, Silverfang, bang, he's grabbing a whole load of these very quickly, but in the anime, it's quite slow and methodical and like you know, carnivalic almost. So some of the detail in Saitama's reaction is different. Obviously the background isn't black in the anime, it's gray. I guess this is to show the outline of the character better. Very little line work in the shading when it comes to shadow on Saitama's head to show the menace. Instead they use like just a tone change in color, something that I don't necessarily think was the right choice, mainly because it's also in the wrong place. It's supposed to go above his nose, but in this it covers his whole center of his face. Not to mention the fact that the lines add this like menace to this situation that the circle just doesn't. But they did add a clenched up and pulsating fist to make up for that. In this panel, Silverfang isn't actually in the shot, and his shocked reaction is in addition to the anime. Now here's where I'm going to mention a continuity error in the anime. See, like both creations, we see the empty pot look. Certain details are different, like pepper and salt being in weird places, and a different array of bowls and soy sauce. But later in this episode, they start to eat the potluck again, as if it isn't empty in this shot. So it's just something that they probably did for pacing and time to help display all the information that's being dumped in this shot. But needless to say, it is a continuity error. This shot of Genos is taken from the wrong side. He's supposed to be facing towards the left. All these wholesome vibes are one-to-one with the manga. This is another shot that's really accurate to the anime, but they, you know, make use of the fact that they have to use a different resolution, obviously, than the manga panel. So they have Genos like pissed off in the corner. Now in the manga, Genos right here calls Blizzard a bitch, but that's not in the anime. Conic characters, if you ask me, hit him with the B word, come on man, but the rest is more or less the same. And now we cut back to the potluck again. See, continuity error in both the anime and manga here, but they're eating the hot pot here again, even though they already got through it all. So Tama tells Genos to give it a rest after, tells him not to be so rude to the professor, but instead it's done the other way around in the anime. Also, when they have that transaction, it's actually given a panel all its own, but in the anime, it's included in this panning shot. The anime has this close-up of the hot pot again, but that isn't in the manga. Instead, we have this shot of Saitama and Bang both reaching for stuff while we see King in the background keeled over. That's when we cut to this close-up of Saitama and Bang. In the manga, we have a panel of Saitama getting up to see if King is alright, and him leaning over King to see that he's not. But in the anime, we skip over him getting up and cut straight to Saitama checking if he's okay. And in the anime, we get this close-up of King, but in the manga, it's not present at all. Instead, we get a panning shot of the outside of Saitama's apartment, which for some reason is repaired now. These three shots are like more or less one-to-one with the anime to manga. I can't complain. And I actually just have to give credit where credit is due. The shot consistency in these three shots is really good. However, that jump into the hole could use work. I think the walk's much better than it was in the Monster Association previously. The map that they are looking at is much different than it is in the manga. Instead of having a close-up and then a pan to see that Garo is still a long ways out from entering the Monster Association, is just, you know, alongside one of the panels. In the anime, he's actually very close to entering the Monster Association. I feel like this graphic doesn't fully explore how absolutely massive the Monster Association is. See, in the manga, we see a side panning shot of all the levels, but in the anime, we have a above ground shot, a bird's eye view shot, and it doesn't show all the floors in the same detail as before. When Garo is addressing the rest of the monsters, there's supposed to be a panel of him still being a little toady beside Lord Orochi's throne. And we're supposed to get a reaction shot of some of these monster silhouettes laughing and saying, hell yeah, let's go get them. So we're supposed to get a shot of it being dark over City Z and then it being bright over City Z. However, that isn't present in the anime. Instead, we cut straight to Saitama's apartment during the day. Something absolutely unforgivable is not in this scene, by the way. Sure, the shelf is slightly different sized, and so is the table, and so is the TV, but the piggy bank is not in the anime. Unforgivable. This panning shot of the side of the buildings isn't present in the manga. Instead, it's a shot of King's face and the shop front's destroyed behind him. And this close-up of the back of King's head isn't in the manga either. This is where they include that shot of King walking and the destruction behind him. The dirt on King's clothes disappears in the manga here for some reason, and there's supposed to be a lot more people in the background that isn't included in the anime. Not to mention a shot of a train shooting by to show King still has to travel by train, much like every other person in this city. This shot here is when Murata fixes the problem and actually adds the detail back, which is the dirtiest of his clothes. And that we get to see the logo that's on his hat, which is different from anime to manga. Also, the two people shouting at him are silhouettes in the manga, but in this they are full-blown drawn characters. In this panning shot, we can see that there's a little bit of detail lost with his eyebrows and sideburns, removing some of the detail around his eyes. So this shot here of the donor at the table, the room he's in is totally different than in the manga. See, the chairs are different style, ever so slightly. There's no bands on the back, but also the room he's in is very different. See, the wall and door are in totally different places. There's many screens and computers in the background that aren't present in the manga. There's a few differences here, so let's just tally it up to, I don't know, let's say 7. In this shot here, the chair should be behind him, but it isn't in the anime. Not to mention his nose is an entirely different shape and his eyebrows are far more slick than they are in the manga. This colored panel is not good. It's not good. I actually quite like when they add color to these still images to add a bit more depth to them, but this one is not the play. This guy's begging this man to save his son's life. These are not the colors to represent those emotions. And I think that they initially also agreed with that, mainly because the whole left side of his face is completely different color to the rest of the background behind that area. It's just not the play, man. In this panning shot in the manga, we get to see his fist all the way up to his shoulder, but they obviously have to start lower because this panning shot would be too jarring if it went that distance in such a short period of time. Tornado is pretty damn consistent. Only thing is, in the manga, we get to see a bit of her thigh gap, which isn't present here at all, which is good. I'm not that sort of anime viewer. Also, I do miss the fact that her clothes used to wave around in previous seasons while she was walking, but now they are, very still. It's a little upsetting, but I guess I can put up with it. We see more censorship here with Zombie Man. He's supposed to be smoking as he's walking in and talking, but instead we get a normal panning shot of him walking forwards. They changed the wording here for Peri Peri Prisoner's entrance to remove any indication that he has a intimate relationship with any of the prisoners. In this shot, there's a wide array of differences. Obviously, Super Ally Darkshine's design is changed because, he's not actually black. Atomic Samurai is more or less the same. Same goes for Child Emperor. Lollipop should be a bit bigger, I guess. Tatsumaki should be a little bigger in her placement. Flashy Flash is more or less perfect, except he's lacking in details in areas. Pig God is Pig God. There is a loss in detail in Peri Peri Prisoner's head, and his hair is slightly different. And I think visually you could probably see the lack in detail in Zombie Man's face because he probably was smoking before, and they had to censor that because, no doubt, the publishers. Not to mention, he's missing a belt. This shot of Tatsumaki is far more zoomed out than it is in the manga. You can see her shoulders, but you can't in the manga. We get a side paneling shot of the heroes walking in, but in the manga we get a full-blown overhead shot of all these characters walking towards the desk, showing their full designs and vibe, which is something that is really actually kind of necessary because there's going to be a lot of crap going on in the next coming episodes and we need to be able to see who's who. They adapted these two panels together for whatever reason they've come up with. And here we can see why in the anime they changed the detail in the previous shot with this room. Mainly because Murata didn't keep consistency with this room and the last room. See, in continuity, these two panels, even though they are many pages apart, are the same room. And they don't look the same. Therefore, in the anime, they've made changes to keep the real continuity together. Something very minor, but it's something they did. Also, there should be 2 chairs between Flashy Flash and Peri Peri Prisoner, but there is only one. During this panning shot, they skip over a shot of a close-up of Child Emperor talking about these trackers and the plan. Then it's supposed to switch to Super Ally Darkshine's reaction, and then we're supposed to get the click, click, to Peri Peri Prisoner's reaction to these trackers. Instead, straight from the panning shot, we skip straight to the click click and Peri Peri Prisoner's reaction, skipping over these 2 panels. Also in the shot of Peri Peri Prisoner reacting to the blinker, Flashy Flash is also in shot with 1 chair between him and Peri Peri Prisoner. So this is another example of the anime correcting one of Murata's mistakes. This shot is obviously different than it is in the manga. In the manga, it's a horizontal panel, but here obviously we have more detail in the back and a chair behind him, which isn't present in the manga. This shot here has background that it didn't previously have in the manga. We skip over a close-up shot here and skip straight to the side panning over shoulder shot that we see here. We're also supposed to get a shot from behind the chairs of this dialogue instead of it just being in this panning shot. In the manga, there's a moment of silence to let Tatsumaki's eeriness set in, or power trip sink in, but that's not present in the anime at all. Next comes a scene where Royal Ripper goes and wakes the kids up and says, oh, yo, I'm gonna cut one of you motherfuckers up. But instead of this eerie panel of him standing over them and then a close-up shot of their reactions, we get a backward shot of him standing over them and their reactions from behind, so we don't get to see their facial expressions. This close-up shot adds a lot of detail in the anime in comparison to manga. Not so much a lot of animation, there's a little bit, but it adds a lot more detail. I'm actually surprised how much of the detail in this scene is translated to anime really well. However, there's a few differences. The blood is really dark. It's not necessarily green, but I'd assume it was supposed to be red. And the panning shot for the entrails and stuff is at a slightly different angle. And the tunnel is supposed to be far smaller and narrower than it is in the anime. See, it's a wide open cavern here in the anime, but in the manga you can see that one of the characters still hasn't even rounded the corner, showing how narrow this area is. This shot looks a lot different in the anime. See, this is a 3D shot. It's fine. It just, much like the ending shot of the final season Demon Slayer, it doesn't look anime. It looks animated, but it just is an entirely different art style, entirely different medium than what we're used to. And although 3D elements are fine in the background, there is nothing in this shot that is a 2D drawing. It's not what I'd love to see, but I fully understand the budgetary restraints and why this might have been necessary. This is one-to-one with the manga. That would be unfortunate, to be fair. It's slightly more zoomed out, so that's one difference. I would have loved to have seen the animation of him, I don't know, running his blade across a kid's cheek. Not that I'm some form of freak, it's just that I'm here to watch an animation and not a shot-to-shot recreation of the manga. Some of the details in this cell are different. The blood splatters are entirely different patterns, and cracks in the wall are there in the anime, well, they're not there in the manga. We're supposed to cut to a blood-stained corner of the room for this dialogue bubble here. That doesn't happen in the anime. Instead, we get a panning shot of the kid, who's supposed to have a double chin in the shot, but he doesn't in the anime. Sorry, the eye, it's just staring into my whole soul. Added detail of flowing fist and the hand grabbing before he grabs it himself. And the whole added swing that isn't in the manga. Gaara's hand is meant to be open in this panel, but it isn't in the anime. There's supposed to be a bit more detail and hair falling down from him blasting Will Ripper's head right off. And I feel like this shot doesn't give enough time for you to actually see the fact that Garo has been stabbed by Will Ripper's right arm. In this close-up shot, we see that Garo is actually holding the blade still. Wasn't in the previous shot in the manga. Something I'll say about when he uses Bomb's technique here is that it's very hard to see that Will Ripper's head is that thing in the top right corner that's getting slashed into pieces. You can see part of his eye, and that is all that you can see. But the rest of the body is pretty okay. It's cut in totally different places, and the pose isn't as dynamic as it is in the manga. Well, that's everything from this episode. Although the chapter is not nearly over, this episode is. And it covered your 89 and 90. Chapter 90 isn't finished yet. We got most of the way through it. But there's been this many differences in the anime today. Quite a few. And once again, the episode was a mixed bag. But the sequence at the end was pretty satisfying. Episode 5 coming up. So first thing I noticed right off the bat is that they skipped this panel right here of the monsters spotting Garo from behind before he quickly turns around and turns them into mince. And as soon as he gets turned into mincemeat, saying he can't really worry about what he's eating, he just needs to replenish for energy. Then he walks away. But in the anime, for probably censorship reasons, he just walks away from the gore that is far less bloody than in the manga. This is something that really bothers me about the anime. Obviously, there's a lot of things that should bother me about this anime, but the fact that they had to censor out a lot of the gore is something that really bothers me. They skipped this perspective shot of the kid chasing after Garo, instead cutting straight to the side panning shot of their two silhouettes running while they talk. In the manga, we get a close-up of Tanjiro while he's trying to explain that there's another hostage and that Garo should come save him. We get a close-up. But in the anime, he simply says it from behind Garo's shoulder. This shot of slowing down is only in the anime. Mainly because in the manga, he says, "Who cares?" while he's still running. Obviously, in the manga, Garo's character is designed with flat colors, but in the anime, he has all these bandages all over his body, which, you know, you cannot see in the manga. This reaction shot of him reacting is different in the anime. It's a close-up in the manga, but in the anime, it's just a continuation from the previous shot. In this shot, there should be way more drool on the ground, and they were forced to make it a panning shot, you know, slowly revealing Overgrown Rover, because in the manga, it's almost a full page spread. So there is absolutely no way for them to, you know, display that much horizontal information in a 1080p resolution. The blood running down Garo's face is only in the anime. And also, Tanjiro is way skinnier in the anime in this shot in particular. They've been pretty okay, but they have been removing his big double chin throughout this anime. The perspective in this shot is like significantly different than in the manga. It's above even Overgrown Rover, just to show how tiny Garo and Tanjiro are in comparison to him. Here, we start Garo and Tanjiro and we pan upwards, not even getting the overhead view of Overgrown Rover. So we're also missing seeing the continuation of drool beneath Overgrown Rover. So the first page of chapter 91 shows that perspective shot that they actually used in the anime. However, they don't include Tanjiro slowly stepping forward, being terrified to move an inch because of the behemoth behind him. But the rest of the, you know, detail is actually pretty goddamn accurate in this shot. We get the added details of Tanjiro's arms because of, you know, the wider angle shot. And our boy's chubby again. What are they doing to him? Bro's getting lipo every other shot. There's a few different details here. So Garo's clothes should be tattered in the corner on the bottom left, and the placement of the blood is slightly different. Pupils shouldn't be visible in this shot. The shape of Overgrown Rover's teeth are slightly different than in the manga, and there's no cracks on the walls in the manga in this shot. Garo's clothes are far more tattered here when he's stepping back in the manga compared to the anime. Rover is a bit more of a chunky boy in the anime compared to the manga in the next panel. And they skip over a close-up of Overgrown Rover and of Garo and Tanjiro to slip straight over to this panel here where it's the wide angle shot. Garo's positioning is wrong here. He's supposed to be showing his chest to the camera, but instead we get full shot of his back, and we get to see the entirety of Tanjiro's head. Here we can see something that was clearly meant to be a scene that they had to cut for budget reasons, because he's leaning up against something, but there's nothing there. Like, he's not leaning up against the wall because the wall's over this side. This is because in the manga, he's leaning up against the wall, and around the corner appears Super Rat. Dun, 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 dun. Then Super Rat punches Garo, destroying the corner of the wall. As, you know, Garo pulls back Tanjiro, and then they're attacked by the spiky boy. Garo pushes Tanjiro to safety, takes on the spiky boy, and dodges all the hot water from Faucet Man, which is a really cool sequence in the manga. But instead, we skip all that in the anime and cut straight to this shot here of essentially their introduction, where the wall is broken. In the anime, we cut straight to that shot and the wall's broken. So, like, this just shows that they were planning to adapt the shot because they have it broken here. They just didn't have the time to do it. The order in which they introduce these monsters is slightly different. First of all, we start with Super Mouse, a disaster level demon. Then we cut to Unicorn, a disaster level demon. And then Showerhead, a disaster level demon. But in the manga, it starts with Showerhead, Super Mouse, then Unicorn. Unihorn, by the way, whoops. When the fight starts, they immediately skip over Unihorn's first attack, where he turns into essentially a vertical Bane Blade. Then Garo kicks him into the wall and moves on to Showerhead. This is where the anime kicks in. It shows Showerhead attacking first instead of Unihorn. Then Garo does his Waterway Fist, punches him in the face and shatters him away as Super Rat comes in with a downward facing punch. In the anime, this shot of Garo turning around isn't in the manga, and the close-up of him getting ready to, you know, commit onslaught is at a completely different angle than in the manga. Water Waving Fist sliding up his arm is also done slightly different. In the manga, it kind of feels like it's gonna spiral up his arm. In the anime, it just simply cuts into 3 holes. In the anime, they also cut to Showerhead's reaction to the destruction, but in the manga, first off, we get a close-up of Garo in his position with Tanjiro behind him, and then a close-up of Tanjiro. Then we cut to the reaction monsters to Garo kicking their asses. But in the anime, we have that reaction first, then the panning shot of Garo, and the close-up shot is slightly different than in the manga. Super Mouse doesn't heal up in this shot in the manga. He heals, like, first of all, he takes the damage and he's feeling the pain, then he's healing up in a close-up shot after. Then you see Garo's reaction going, huh. And in that shot, he is facing the wrong direction in the anime. The next shot is also, he's facing the wrong direction. In the anime, they skip over a panel where they're talking about disaster levels and how Garo doesn't see them as being reliable at all. All you guys are a bunch of dumbasses being manipulated by pure nonsense. Then we cut to this overly detailed panel of Garo saying, in that case, wouldn't I be disaster level dragon? It's lacking a lot of the detail and clarity that it is in the manga, unfortunately. I just do not know why they have this scratching effect on the outside. Where Super Mouse is supposed to throw Unicorn at Garo as an attack, which by the way looks sick in the manga. But instead, we get this shot of him shouting and then shooting himself off again as the same attack as he did before. This close-up being completely original, not in the manga at all. So instead of Garo deflecting the spear and shooting it down the hallway, instead, the kick from previously in the manga that wasn't adapted in the anime is used here to kick Unicorn down the dark corridor rather than the deflect from before, which was a poor choice in my opinion because holy crap, that shit looks epic. In the manga, when Rover eats Unicorn, you get to see Unicorn's head roll past Garo, but in this it seems to just be like a part of him. A part of him that isn't, necessarily his head and mouth. This extreme zoom in is original to the anime, and when Rover's attack goes off, which is fucking cool by the way, in the manga we get to see the first monster get disintegrated, and then we get that whiteout when it's Super Mouse's turn. However, in the anime, they simply just blast both of them away in one shot. I would like to say that I thought it would be important for them to, still distinguish that they're running down this like featureless corridor, but instead the anime just does like an anime speed effect. The blood on Garo's face once again here is completely different than it is in the manga. The cracking is slightly different than it is in the anime in terms of direction of the hallway and cracks that happen. When they land in the manga, Garo tosses Tanjiro behind him, but in the anime, he simply places him down. In the anime, we can see Rubble either side of Tanjiro while he's running away, and Overgrown Rover basically being almost fully visible in the top left of the screen. The Rubble Hill isn't here in the right in the manga, nor is Overgrown Rover's placement the same. In this shot, Overgrown Rover sees Tanjiro and turns to charge up his attack, and he only starts charging that attack at a close-up, but here they do it all in the one animation. This close-up of Garo flying towards Overgrown Rover is also only in the anime, because in the manga they cut straight to the onslaught to Grover's shin. This close-up of the perspective change of Garo's attacks is also only in the anime, as is the hair grabbing and pulling himself back in to attack again. That's all anime original animation, including the jump back, by the way. The only thing that's in the manga is Overgrown Rover's reaction and the Garo slide. We can see a lot more here in the anime than in the manga. When Garo, after he has his kind of monologue and flashback, in the manga we actually get to see a complete perspective change of a side-cutting view of the Monster Association and how utterly devastating Overgrown Rover's blast was. It went through at least 8 levels, killing everything and everyone in his path. Then we cut to this shot to see where the blast ended, seeing just the devastation on display. But in the anime, we cut straight to the last panel and see as some of the debris falls down. They skip a panel of Overgrown Rover walking down the corridor to walk towards this now new sort of supposed cliff face sort of thing, and are missing a little bit of detail when it comes to the shot of Rover standing over Garo as it reveals that he's still alive. We see the silhouette of Garo standing up, which is only in the anime. But one of the things they cut from the anime is the fact that Garo is supposed to be utterly dripping with blood in this close-up. Bro got knocked through like 10 stories. Of course he's gonna be a little bit bloody. But in the anime, he's, you know, no blood on him at all. And his eye does some cool flashy thing instead. The side in which Overgrown Rover shoots this blast is slightly different than it is in the manga, as are Garo's dodging reactions to these blasts. The angle at which Overgrown Rover first jumps out is slightly different, but the rest is like almost just perfect. It looks so good. This sequence is one of the best in the episode. In the manga, Garo is a silhouette in the explosion that actually hits him here, but in the anime, he's simply overtaken by an explosion from the bottom of the screen. And they use this panel of Overgrown Rover stepping forward to actually pan into Garo holding onto the ledge above him instead of cutting for it. Only cutting to show this shot here and the close-up. Something to note in the close-up is that Garo is less veiny than he is in the manga. His expression is also slightly different, and his hair is far more sporadic in the manga. In this shot in the manga, we get to see all three of Grover's eyes have the same image in their reflection, which is Garo. The close-up image of just one eye doesn't really actually work too well, in my opinion. They actually don't really adapt this punch very well in the anime. This swing of the punch from Garo, the focus of it is in the, you know, moment before the impact. But in the anime, they pan out the entire dialogue from the previous two panels and put it into this one here. So they have to make the punch wind up far more than it does in the manga. Overgrown Rover is supposed to charge up this attack far more because he's supposed to blast Garo another like 30 levels down into the Monster Association, just showing how unbelievably big this place is, by the way, with a beam that is unbelievably fucking massive. We're supposed to be able to see a light from the end of this tunnel that is caused by Overgrown Rover's attack. The placement of the rubble is also fairly different. This panning shot of Giro is not present in the anime. Instead, it's just a side close-up angle. In this shot here where all the blood is shooting up, notice that the blood's never red. So my theory about censorship being a big issue in this anime is obviously coming to fruition here. Instead, they would rather splash up all the colors of monster blood that aren't red. They skip over a close-up of Giro here, cutting straight to the pile of monster bodies. They skip over this panel of Psychos approaching, also this close-up of Psychos when she's approaching Lord Orochi, and then obviously the inclusion of her in this panic shot where she is talking about Lord Orochi. The placement of all those scenes are totally different, and her inclusion in each of them is gone. They also skip over a close-up of Garo here, and a flashback to Garo's fight with Royal Ripper. In this shot here, in the anime, Garo is like completely stagnant, but in the manga, he's clearly like trembling, trying to escape from Garo's telekinesis. They also skip over this panel here of Garo's close-up and Garo on the right-hand side, cutting straight to Garo actually managing to break free of the telekinetic hold for a little bit. They also skip over Garo's reaction. It's supposed to be a big panning shot of Garo actually like resisting the telekinesis and then him managing to take a step forward. And here where we're supposed to get a close-up of Garo's elbows and fists before he breaks free. We're supposed to get a reaction shot from Garo here before Garo starts to point at him. There's a few details about this landing here that isn't, you know, exactly right. Garo's kind of bandages are supposed to be like directly up, reacting to the fact that he has landed straight. Not to mention he doesn't have this glowing eye. JC staff took, you know, liberties where they could. They overly shaded everything because they weren't able to do Murata's artwork justice here in this shot. It's one of, once again, the most visually impressive shots in the chapter, and maybe even the manga. So with that being said, his hands are different, and both hands are in different positions. His hair is far less spiky than it's supposed to be. He doesn't have this aura about him in the manga. The bandages aren't supposed to be wrapped around his shoulders in the way that they are, and his feet positions are also quite different. And the rock he is also standing on is a little different too. We're supposed to get a close-up of Garo after that, and then cut to this. So in the manga, these sharp tentacle-like things start coming out of the ground, but in the manga, those are his fingers. There's 5 of them. They are his fingers. We know this because in the next panel in the manga, we don't see those spikes. We see his fingers. So here in the anime, there's a little bit of confusion. The tentacles come up and then a hand does, which is not the same way it is in the manga. And we're supposed to get this close-up of Garo before their close-up of Lord Orochi, but they're the opposite way in the anime. And then that's when the Monster Association starts to transform. We're supposed to get a close-up of Cogs and the room that they're in being separated from the theater, and then overly, insanely detailed backdrop of all the areas where the Monster Association is breaking waking up to make this possible. But in the anime, it's just a few face-ward fronting things that slowly start to slide open. And we should see a lot more light beams and dust falling from the roof than we do in the anime. We cut to Saitama walking down his street with his comic book. But in the manga, I believe that this doesn't happen till, I think, chapter 93. So I think they're borrowing something from the next chapter in order to just space out this unbelievable fight. When he leans up here, we're supposed to get 2 shots of Lord Orochi, the imposing one first and then the close-up after. But instead, we get him standing up and then those 2 shots. For some reason, the fabric Lord Orochi has on him is red in this shot, where realistically it seems that it's supposed to be white. That would lead to the clear contrast with the heart in the center of his chest. We're supposed to see Lord Orochi's tail come out the back of his character here, but it's not present. There's supposed to be a close-up of Gero and he's, talking there. We skip over a panel of showing that there is a clear silhouette in Garo's body. Then he gets up saying that it's no problem, showing the circle missing from his torso. His eyes don't light up, nor do the 2 extra eyes on his neck that are present there. Also, he seems to be missing a row of teeth. We're supposed to get a shot of monsters starting to group up and look at this fight, but it's not present here. Instead, cutting straight to Garo running up Lord Orochi's tentacles. There is a lot of embellishment with that, by the way. Then we cut to the monsters that we saw group up before. There's blood missing from them getting cut in half by Garo, and there's also one of the monsters missing. Not to mention, Lord Orochi's shoulder is supposed to be visible to the left of the screen, but it isn't as well. In this shot here of Garo slowly flying down towards Lord Orochi, his jaw is supposed to be cracking because this is just a mask he wears to seem like he's even remotely humanoid. I'm just gonna put this down to 1 point, saying that there's a few details missing from this. That's all I'm gonna say. This reaction shot is pretty fucking good, but it's missing some of the blood on his shoulders. We're supposed to have a close-up on Gero here, like a smug one, just before we see the full shot of Lord Orochi. The angle of this panel is slightly different than it is in the anime. We're supposed to get a shot of Garo actually getting hit by this blast, but we only get one of him seemingly dodging it. It's very unclear in the anime. Although they do zoom out a lot, there is a lot of detail lost in this panel. Just look at this, and then this is what it was adapted to. I understand that there was a lot of limitations when it came to this anime. God, I know that, don't worry. But the thing is, this is not exactly what that panel is supposed to portray. This isn't about Garo in this panel. It's about the unfathomable power of Lord Orochi, king of the monsters. And I feel like the anime adaptation, although I love these explosion and fire effects, it's just not on par with the manga here. We're supposed to get this whipping effect of his arm whipping back to him like, Luffy's would in One Piece, but it's not present here in the anime. We're supposed to get a close-up of Gero's back as he's reacting to the hole that Garo's body made in the wall. And him getting up doesn't happen till later. It happens at a different angle as well, not from behind. But the most horrible thing about this is that we don't see Garo's smiling face imprint on the ground, showing that things really aren't over in a comedic way. It's not so clear that Garo actually jumps between 2 of Lord Orochi's fingers here, because we missed that close-up of him shooting between the fingers and the close-up of Garo looming in for the attack, because they cut straight to this beautiful panel of all of Lord Orochi's tentacle monsters flying towards Garo as he charges up this unbelievable attack. Now, although they adapt the next 2 panels perfectly, it is so unclear to a anime watcher what happened, because you get those 2 shots in 3 seconds. In a manga, you get to pace it yourself. So you see something, then you see a black, that makes you take a pause. But in an anime, you have to earn that pause. And they didn't do it for this shot because we cut straight to Garo being lodged into the wall. And this just leaves a lot of anime fans confused as to what actually happened. Obviously, as the panning shot happens, you have enough time to realize what happened. It's not very clear that this is a fist mark. Lord Orochi punched Garo into this wall. And apart from that, the rest of the episode is more or less 1-to-1 with its manga. And finally, Episode 6. The first difference I notice is that the first shot we should get, the inside of the Hero Association, is a close-up of Child Emperor. Instead, in the anime, we get this panning shot of wide table, something we don't get till 3 panels later. Instead, opting for this close-up shot of Child Emperor after. When Elder Centipede appears on the hologram, it's supposed to be a close-up of the hologram and Pig God eating. However, they simply cut to the next panel and use that instead. In this shot of Super Alloy Darkshine and Pig God, we're supposed to see the hologram moving in front of them as they talk, but in this, it's simply absent. Also, as always, mark one difference down for Super Alloy Darkshine's change in design. The shots they use while Peri Prisoner is explaining the pain he went through is slightly different, but you know, it doesn't actually impact the moment in any meaningful way. In this shot, censorship is present because Zombie Man is supposed to be smoking. Also, in this shot, Zombie Man's belts are not supposed to be visible. He takes them off during this meeting for some reason. Not to mention the 2 chairs to Zombie Man's right are not supposed to be visible. This close-up of the hologram of Drive Knight is far more zoomed in than it is in the manga. The manga has other information regarding the situation surrounding him. The belts are now back on Zombie Man, even though they were gone before in the manga. There is a severe loss in toning detail on Tatsumaki's clothes. Murata do be kind of fiending for this character. Also, her hair curls are actually just facing the wrong way. They're supposed to curl to the left in this image. Instead, they curl to the right. Also, there's more detail in the background in the anime. In the anime, you actually can't see Super Alloy Darkshine's corner in this shot. Also, the stars all over Flashy Flash's costume are supposed to be dark in color, but in the anime, for some reason, they make them bright blue. Also, his sword is an entirely different style than it is in the manga. Her prisoner is supposed to have a shot alone of his hand shooting up, saying excuse me, then we cut to this panel. In this shot in the manga, we don't see Flashy Flash in the panel. Not to mention, Flashy Flash's sword is a arrowhead for some reason in this shot. And there's also a chair missing from the bottom right of the screen. In this shot in the manga, we don't actually get to see this whole lineup of the heroes on the top of the screen. We just get to see that he is actually directing this towards Atomic Samurai, and he does a kissy face. Minor change, but Flashy Flash's hair is supposed to fall under his cape here, but instead they have it lying over his cape. Once again, Murata's art changes a lot here. There's a lot less tonal detail on her, and the hair is very much off model in this shot. The art for Tatsumaki here is also once again off model. In the manga, she doesn't have any eyebrows, and her facial features are far more centralized into her face. In this shot, Zombie Man is supposed to be lighting his second cigarette. There's supposed to be a shot of Zombie Man making eye contact with Tatsumaki, but instead we just cut straight to a panning shot to Tatsumaki. In this panning shot, they actually skip over a few panels, mainly of Super Alloy Darkshine's reaction to its unbelievable size, with a perspective shot leaning from the top of the tower looking down at Super Alloy Darkshine, and then a close-up of the same perspective as his resolve hardens. They also skip over a shot of where Flashy Flash glares at Tatsumaki before having this shot here of this interaction. There's supposed to be a looming dark figure behind Child Emperor, but instead we just cut straight to the reveal, skipping over any era of mystery and dread that the previous shot gave. Instead, we simply just have, still image of My Mask entering. There's a lot of lack of detail here. There's supposed to be a lot of detail in his cross pendant and also just his clothes in general, but instead it's a complete flat tone. This is actually kind of strange because a lot of the time when Murata uses flat tones in the manga, they tend to, add a bit of spice and tone and texture to the fabric, but here they've done the total opposite. They skip over a panel of Child Emperor spinning his chair around to see My Mask face to face, instead cutting to him already being face to face, once again making a disconnect for the viewers. In this shot, it kind of just looks like it's the same from the last, but we don't have the added information that he had actually turned around to face him. This is a total anime original shot here. Not that it added a shot, but however, it did use a section from a previous shot as a close-up here, instead of having Child Emperor spin the chair back around to the table, nervous because he has to break the news to My Mask that he's not an attack team. They skip a zoomed out shot that was used to build anticipation from the manga, cutting straight to my mask reaction. Minor thing, waitress's costume's a little different and her hair should be lighter, not to mention the fact that Super Ally Darkshine is supposed to be holding protein powder in his hand. We're supposed to be able to see Tatsumaki freaking out in the corner of this panel, as the line of sight is supposed to follow along the edge of the table. However, it is just a close-up of my mask standing further away from the table. And this is the shot that kind of annoys me the most in the entire episode. We're supposed to get this like really character driven like panel of Zombie Man looking up, being fed up with the situation and blowing out a huge lungful of smoke. Really imposing panel, but instead they just cut to the panel that comes after, where he starts to monologue a little bit, removing that entire moment that really kind of emphasizes a lot of what Zombie Man is about. Fed up with all the S-class bullshit and politics. Also, in this panning shot of his monologue, Child Emperor is not supposed to be visible. They skip over 2 panels in this transaction here. In the transaction where My Mask confronts Zombie Man about his origins and possible monsterization, they skip over 2 panels. One, Zombie Man's initial reaction, and then one of the final words My Mask says, before cutting to Super Allied Darkshine and Pig God. When My Mask starts this monologue here, it's supposed to be a close-up of Pig God absolutely devouring his bucket of cola. They skip an overhead panning shot of the stunned silence at My Mask's arrogance. It's supposed to be a reaction shot from Super Allied Darkshine before we see My Mask's freak out. There's supposed to be a close-up of Tatsumaki noticing that King's entering before the announcement goes off. They skip over a panel with My Mask and King. That's the start of this conversation. The expression on these characters here is totally different than it is in the anime. And also, this reaction is honestly pathetic. The emotion on the characters in the manga is so visibly clear, but in the anime, every single character's reaction shot to this news is that of boredom, other than My Mask. Everyone else, they look so completely disinterested. But in the manga, they're very clearly surprised by this information. The only person's art who is remotely on par is Tatsumaki. But not that we have any time to really react to this, because they're PNG cutouts that aren't even integrated to, form a decent animation together or graphic together. Simply slapped on screen without any form of intention or thought. There's supposed to be a reaction shot of Flashy Flash sigh with relief as My Mask leaves. There's supposed to be a close-up of King here after this image here. There's a lot more helicopters visible here in this shot than there is in the manga. Not to mention, the design for said helicopters is entirely different. Instead of zooming straight into the panel that's inside the lift, we're supposed to get a close-up of Sitch's reflection on the glass as he's looking out and seeing the destruction of the landscape that previous monster fights have had in the area. Instead, they just have a normal close-up of Sitch talking. There's supposed to be a panel of Sitch turning around from looking out the window and then turning. The angle of this shot is entirely different than it is in the manga. Sure, it's roughly the same, but the angle at which we see these characters, the camera pans at a very different angle, and the room that they're also in is entirely different. We're supposed to get an introduction to all of the top rankers here, telling us their hero names and their rank, and a little about them. It's totally not present at all here in the anime. Instead, only using Needle Star to voice the opinions of the entire group. They're actually supposed to make any form of, physical reaction to this other than one person saying yippee without moving or changing their facial expression. And they're all supposed to thank Needle Star for voicing the opinion that they were all thinking. He's also just not supposed to be very happy about the enthusiasm. There's supposed to be a reaction panel of Silverfang seeing that someone is opening the door. Then it's revealed that it's King trying to hide, but instead they use it from the other side. King comes in, hides, and is relieved that he can hide. Then it's revealed that they're in the same room as Silverfang. Not to mention we missed 2 panels of his reaction to getting inside from the perspective of the hallway and him closing the door. The positioning of these 2 characters is wrong. They're supposed to be switched around. Bang on the left and King on the right. There's supposed to be a shot of Bomb going to pick up a newspaper and gathering the information that there is a child hostage, rather than King delivering that information. This shot is facing the wrong way. This shot is facing the wrong way. There's supposed to be a close-up of the liquor that is in the room with them. Once again, the positioning in this shot here is wrong. This shot of King closing the door is not not visible. We simply see him get up, say see you later, and then he's walking down the hallway. They're supposed to be actually walking forward in the shot, just saying. There's supposed to be a close-up of the Blizzard group in hospital, but that's not present here at all. There's supposed to be a close-up of Genos's jeans as he's walking from his waist down, facing the wrong way here. There's supposed to be a close-up of Genos's arms steaming with energy, then the close-up of his core exploding. This seems to be a lot of like fire and plasma, but in the manga it's simply just all lightning. This is when they use the close-up of the arm in the anime instead of having it before, because here we're supposed to see a close-up of Dr. Kusno and Genos. The perspective of this shot is very much different because Genos is supposed to be facing the stairs into the apartment, already starting to walk up in the same panel as Blizzard's reaction of being fed up with him. This entire conversation skips over multiple panels of perspective shots of them climbing the stairs to make this scene flow seamlessly into the next. However, they decide to simply show this outward shot of the apartment instead of actually showing us the characters that are talking. Here in the anime, Blizzard stands still. At no point in the manga does she stand still while climbing the stairs. Not to mention, the entire time she's climbing the stairs in the manga, she's holding her dress up so it doesn't get caught on the stairs. There's no shot of Genos standing here waiting for Blizzard to come up and follow him. He simply grabs the door and opens it and walks in. He makes a close-up of a full glass of water. Genos deduces that there might have been an emergency because Saitama would never leave a full glass of water sitting on the table alone. There's a close-up of Genos when we hear Bang and Blast enter in the manga. However, in this, they simply spin Blizzard's head round to achieve the same effect. They skip over another perspective shot from behind Fang and Bomb as they enter the apartment, instead cutting straight to the over-the-shoulder Genos panel. They skip over the fact that Bomb is the one to deliver the information that the Monster Association is nearby, and it's supposed to be a close-up of him. And that's pretty much the end of all the differences in this episode.